how to find AI gold, how to deliver valuable real-world AI impact through solutions that solve problems, and how we can use some of what we've learned by building products over the last couple of decades. So unless you've been in a cave, you're aware that there's a gold rush happening out there where certain companies are definitely making money on building AI hardware and solutions. And a lot of people are heading out to mine for AI gold. What does that look like? How do we get real value out of AI is the question. A lot of the conversations inside organizations feel like they're more of the technology, the solutions, rather than what do we actually do with this? A lot of the conversation is about how do we train it with the right data? How do we rationalize the data from different systems? And not necessarily what's the outcome that we can create for that. So that's a problem that we're seeing. Whether you agree with recent research from MIT about the number of generative AI projects that are failing to produce meaningful results or not, it's pretty clear for anybody looking at what organizations are doing with AI that we're not seeing the value yet. We're not seeing the full potential value of this amazing technology. And the problem isn't necessarily with the technology, the infrastructure, the regulation, or even the talent training people around it. It's around how do we approach it. And like any other technology in recent memory, there's this anti-pattern that we approach it from a solution perspective rather than a problem or outcome perspective. Let's take a different look at what is going on. I really like this visual of how AI technology is being diffused or adopted in different segments of, let's say, the marketing world, just as an example. This is the crossing the chasm chart. You're probably familiar with it if you're familiar with Jeffrey Moore's work. It's used for any technology or approach. And when you look at AI, what we're seeing here is that when you look at the whole marketing world, there are people that are already talking and experimenting with AI agents and agentic workflows, but those are just the innovators, the early adopters. The majority of the people are barely using AI as a replacement for search or as an assistant, a conversational assistant like ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, for personal use to be more productive at tasks that you're running yourself. A lot of people are still struggling with what is AI? Do we really want to use it? Is it a threat to us? Can it be valuable? And that's okay. The same sort of diffusion or distribution of people and how they're using AI exists in any organization. So in an organization, you will see people that are hoping to use AI for search results or using AI for search results, whether the organization is allowing them to use it or not. There are the people that are conversing with AI, maybe even creating their own gems or ChatGPT projects or Perplexity spaces. And there are very few people that are trying to use AI for agentic workflows or even building autonomous AI agents. And that's true for marketing, and that's true for any other function across the organization. So one of the challenges that we face is, okay, we want to use AI more. We want to use it for more than search results. Where is the gold? Like maybe there is gold in agentic workflows and AI agents or even using AI assistants, but where is that gold? So one of the ways to think about it is if we're going to search for gold, let's use the modern replacement of the tools that the searchers use. What does it look like to pen or sift for AI gold? So that's what I'm going to be talking about today. I'm going to be talking about how do we focus our investments on your constraints or more expensive problems or lucrative opportunities in your business, in your company, how to treat even internal AI capabilities as products. My background is in coaching product organizations and businesses how to develop themselves. That background is very relevant for finding AI gold. So how do we apply product thinking and techniques to find AI gold? How do we accelerate the discovery lifecycle, discovering where is gold? by leveraging Gen AI itself for cheaper and faster experimentation. So how do we use AI to find AI gold? And even how do we use the sawdust from this process of discovery, the process of product making, as additional information and context that even improves our Gen AI performance? And results being, let's find more gold. Hi, I'm Yuval. I help organizations build and scale smarter by learning how to build products in a smarter fashion, build product organizations smarter. And these days, applying these techniques to thinking as the organization as a product and focusing on each organization needs to both run itself, but also work on itself, develop itself. And what I find is the same techniques that I've used to help product development organizations are very effective for helping organizations develop themselves. So let's dive in. One of the models I like to use for finding AI gold is the customer factory. The customer factory essentially says every successful company can be seen as a customer factory or a happy customer factory. In Scaling Lean, Ash came up with this model. It's not a new model for these aspects. It's also the R metrics, the pirate metrics that you look at if you want to create sustainable growth. Essentially, you can think about your organization as a factory that starts with acquiring customers, then activating them, then retaining them, turning them into revenue, delivering enough value so that you create revenue. Ideally, the customers are happy enough that they refer others. If this works well, it becomes a flywheel. It becomes a situation where the better your product, the happier your customers, the smoother it is to bring in more and more customers. The rotation of this wheel becomes easier. We produce more because our referrals make acquiring new customers much easier. It's almost like a viral movement. Business flywheels are the sort of thing that Amazon used to grow, and they're very popular these days as a metaphor for how you think about growing your business and working through your constraints as a business. Speaking of that, a similar technique that can be used here is the theory of constraints. If you want to grow, if you want to do the best thing for growing your business or tackling challenges with your business right now, you want to find the friction in your flywheel, the bottleneck in your customer factory. And that's the area that you want to improve. So for example, if you don't have enough customers to even activate, that might be the constraint. It might not make sense to try to extract as much revenue as possible from these customers if you're not even acquiring them. If you're acquiring them, but every second customer that you're acquiring churns very quickly, it might not make sense to try and acquire more customers. Let's focus on retention first. Let's make sure that we have a solid customer lifetime value before we throw gas on the fire to acquire more people. If we create more value, it will also turn into more referrals. If we have happy customers, but are not seeing enough referrals from those customers, maybe that's the constraint we can tackle. But let's not focus on creating more referrals if our customers aren't happy. It's not going to work. So addressing the weakest link is the only thing that matters. Why am I even talking about it? It's because when you want to leverage AI in your organization, you want to focus on where it matters. So let's look at an example. Let's look at myself, my business. So if I look at my business, there are acquisition challenges that I'm facing that I want to do something about. I know that when I bring on a customer, they're very happy and there's a strong lifetime value for the customers that I acquire. So at this point, I'm focused on acquisition. How do I acquire more customers? So for example, how can I convert people that listen to podcasts that I'm on and website visitors into prospects? Am I converting enough of these people into customers? Is my close rate good enough? Is my average deal close time good enough? That could be another area that I focus on. It's a choice, right? I need to decide which of these areas do I focus on. By unleashing AI, let's say using the connection between ChatGPT and Folk CRM into my world, it can help me analyze and understand where is it better to invest. Is it in bringing in more leads, more prospects, or converting more of these prospects? That's something that I'll need to think through. But that's the first conversation to have. Where am I focused? Where do I want to make a difference? It doesn't make sense at the moment to go in and improve retention because I don't have a retention problem. So the process that I need to go through, and you might want to go through in your business, you're trying to think through where can I get the most ROI for my AI investments, is a strategic question. What is the goal? What is my goal as a business? What is my growth goal? What's currently going on in my customer factory? Where are the obstacles? What am I seeing? And then what is my strategy? I need to form a strategy for where will I play. And that can be seen as two things. That can be seen as an external view of what is the audience or the market that I will focus on. For example, I might say, I'm going to focus on mid-market companies. I'm going to focus on medium businesses rather than enterprises because I have a certain advantage in that space. And how will I win is what do I bring to that space that helps me win there? But another view on this that people don't often take is where will I play internally? Where will I play, let's say with AI? I will focus, for example, on my sales capabilities, or I will focus on marketing, or on establishing expertise, or on my product. That's a choice. Where to play is a choice. It's a choice that I will focus in that area, and I will not focus in other areas that much for now. I will consider them stable. I will consider them okay. And then once I decide to focus in a certain area, let's say internally, how will I win there? So if I decide to, let's say, use AI for customer acquisition, how do I plan to do that? Is it to unleash AI for cold outreach? Probably not. Is it to use AI to help coach me on my customer interactions, combining best practices from business coaches that I follow together with data from my CRM? Maybe that's one area. Do I use AI to help me cut clips from long form content that I create? There are different approaches. But now AI is not just, I can use AI for everything. It's very focused on what am I trying to achieve. Once I decide on a strategy, I want to create a goal beyond my day-to-day mayhem and the work. And for anybody like me that has to balance billable work for customers and providing value on a day-to-day basis and also working on the business. And that's all of you as well. Every organization needs to run the customer factory, deliver value, but also think about how do we grow the factory. We need to have clear goals, objectives for what do we want to see? What's the future state? What's the picture of the future you want to create? In this case, the strategic shift you want to achieve through AI, or the strategic shift I want to achieve through using AI in my business. And what does success look like? Those are the key results. How do we measure whether or not we hit that objective? What does this new reality look like? And it's not that I've used AI. It's maybe that I've improved my average deal close time or my close rate, or I see more engagement on my mailing list, or better engagement in my market research outreach on LinkedIn, whatever it is that I choose to focus on, that I choose to use AI for. AI shouldn't be part of the objective necessarily. It's a tool that I use, a technology that I use to achieve an outcome. And maybe along the way, I'll figure out different ways to achieve that that don't require AI. Or I think about very different ways to use AI for that. And that's okay, because AI is not the goal, it's the means here. Once I decide to focus on a certain area, I need to dive deeper. I need to dive into, okay, with that outcome in mind, who are the people, the users, the clients, the prospects, people inside my organization, me maybe, that I want to focus on? What's the job that I'm trying to get done or that they're trying to get done? Maybe it's to learn about how to scale their business. Maybe it's to deal with agile theater. Maybe they're frustrated with all of the investments that they've made in training and consulting, and none of that is really bearing fruit. And, they're afraid that somebody's going to wake up and see all that theater and it's not going to reflect well on them. So those are the users and the outcomes. It could also be people inside your organization, your sales associates, developers, talent acquisition, people that are trying to do something important for the business that is currently at the constraint. For example, a business owner that I talked to yesterday, their biggest constraint is bringing on board the right talent. It's very hard for them to find talented people for their financial services small business. That's going very fast, growing crazy. Acquisition is not their issue, but delivering value is the issue for them. In order to deliver value, what they're finding is that their challenge is, how do I find the right people? How do I get them up to speed with my processes, my value creation as quickly as possible so that I can unleash them to work with customers and they become leverage, not a liability for me. In our next conversation, we'll talk about if that's the situation, if the outcome that we want is for us to be able to scale, to deliver more value without our individual involvement, what is the solution? How do we think we will get there? And here is where we can start talking about, this is where we think AI can help. Maybe I can help filter through resumes. Maybe we can use it some other way. Maybe it's only relevant for onboarding people quickly. Maybe we can avoid hiring people because AI can actually help us deliver more value to more people on our own. So maybe adding people is just one way to achieve the outcome. Maybe the outcome is that we want is to scale. Adding people is just one way to do that, which is a great example of why do we focus on outcomes rather than outputs or activities. So with that in mind, we'll need to form an hypothesis. We believe that we will be able to scale this financial services business better if we can more easily hire the right people using AI-based recruiting. Or we believe that we will be able to serve twice the number of clients if we gain efficiencies using agentic workflows. Okay, that's an hypothesis. What's the most important thing we need to learn first? So what's the most risky thing about using AI agentic workflows for serving more customers? Maybe it's whether people are willing to let us use AI to work on their financials. Maybe it is our own conviction that we cannot use AI for that. Maybe it's the ability to access our customers' data using AI. How does that work with MCP? Maybe it is a feasibility challenge. Maybe it is a desirability. Maybe there's something else. Let's look at those different risks and do the minimal amount of work to learn on, are we smelling gold here? Can we sniff out better ideas, get rid of not so great ideas at the minimal cost? One of the key conversations to have at this point is to make sure that we're focusing on the right things. A lot of the time, our goals are either focused on features, for example, hiring more people is a feature, or on the business impact. They're too far. We want to grow revenue. We want to improve customer satisfaction. So what's the problem with either of these? The impact level is not as actionable. It doesn't provide strategic choices. Everybody wants to grow revenue, but what are we going to focus on in order to grow revenue? What are we not going to focus on? Focusing on acquisition as a way to drive revenue is a choice. If we take an example that we often use in the Sense and Respond Lean product management workshops, if you're running, let's say, a mattress store, it's not that useful to have a goal of increased revenue. You need to be a bit more intentional around what is the input, the drives that leads to people creating more revenue. Yes, revenue is when a customer buys a mattress, but even say customers buy more mattresses is not a very useful goal. It's more useful to think about and convey a strategy for what are we going to do to drive that. And here the hypothesis, for example, that When potential customers lie down on the mattress and bring a partner, they're more likely to buy mattresses. Now that's useful because now we can focus on things that are going to move the needle on that. We're making choices. We're not going to tackle other things at the moment. We're going to be laser focused and decisive around what is going to move the needle, what we believe is going to move the needle for getting more people to lie down on mattresses. And now the features, the output, the activities that we drive should be focused on that. But we're not married to any of these activities. We might try to have the information for the mattresses on the ceiling, or to do something that incentivizes the customer to bring their partner. We will try it. We will experiment. We will sense whether it's useful and double down or pivot to something else. We will inspect the result and adapt as needed. And in these cases where we need to learn, it's useful to make sure that our process enables this learning. But on the other end, it can be wasteful to constantly try to learn, to constantly experiment, even when it's useless. So one of the things that I like to do is when I think about my goals, the areas where I want to intervene, developing my business, one of the things to think through after coming up with the strategy and with potential initiatives for interventions is, do I need to test this? Is there a lot of risk here? What's the relationship between the opportunity, the value, and the risk? If there's high potential value and high risk, it makes sense to test. If there's high value but low risk, it's an easy bet. Let's just do it. Let's measure, but let's just do it. If it's high risk with low value, let's probably not tackle that. There are better opportunities. If it's low risk and relatively low value, maybe I can do something quick, get it off the table. Maybe I just put it aside. So the hypothesis prioritization canvas is something that I can use, that I integrate into my own Kanban board for thinking through the initiative of the business. That helps me decide, do I want to test this? How much time do I want to spend on testing this thing using tracer bullets? Or do I just ship and measure this? This is a technique that helps me and helps business owners that I work with avoid two extremes. Avoid analysis paralysis versus the chaos factory, just jumping and starting to do things and just throwing technology at things without even thinking, versus thinking too much and getting stuck. What we want is to, if you think about this from a financial perspective, and even when I'm working on my own business or a business owner works on the business, any hour that you invest in working on your business is very expensive. You have a very limited budget of time to work on your business, even if it's internal costs. For sure, if it's an external investment. You want to minimize the costs into initiatives that are unproven. So you want to think through, what are the risks with this initiative that I'm considering? And if I don't have high conviction about this, then I want to minimize the cost by running efficient experimentation. We'll talk about how do we run these efficient experimentations in a bit. And as soon as I learn enough to grow the conviction, I can move from discovery to delivery mode. So on one hand, we want to be a business champion. We want to be decisive about something. We want to be decisive about the fact that this is what we're focused on. This is our rock. This is our goal. This is how we want to leverage AI. But we also want to be lean and agile. We want to minimize the cost of this decisive investment until we know for sure, or sure enough, what's going to happen with it. Until we learn on desirability. Do people really want this? Will people inside the organization want to work this way? Be willing to work this way? Is it viable to run this? Is it feasible to do this? A lot of the time we focus on feasibility way too early. One of the things I've learned is, let's start with desirability before we focus on it. So the key point here is, learn before you burn. When something is high value and you want to test it, go through discovery. And be very careful when the value is low. For sure, it doesn't make sense to test. Maybe it makes sense to do it quickly. So going back to my world and my challenges, how can I convert more people? How can I acquire more customers? One of the things that I've done, and you could argue it was potentially the wrong investment. The main reason I've done that is to actually get more familiar with vibe coding. Is my assumption was the question I was grappling with was, can I convert more visitors and listeners using an interactive lead magnet that focuses on the expensive problem I assume they're facing? And one of the best practices in this space is to use quizzes, scorecards as lead magnets. That's not something I invented. There are already applications that do that. I could take one of these applications and use it for my wall instead of an email newsletter or a free email course. I could create such an assessment on an existing tool and try that. What I've done here is I've also developed it for myself, not because, it's still, it would have been cheaper in the scheme of things to just go to Scorecard or another tool and use it. But here the learning itself was a reason that I've done this. And I've learned quite a bit about where vibe coding works, where it falters, and what are some best practices for doing it well. Surprise, surprise, the best practices that I've been teaching product owners, product managers, product leaders, engineering leaders for decades at this point, and what I've learned myself when leading teams are very similar to how you manage or lead a vibe coding team or a vibe coding agent. I won't go deep into this today, but the same things that lead to effective product development with people are effective with AI. And that's a common theme here. The things that work for us for building effective products, for building impactful products, being iterative, starting with, a very small slice, focusing on desirability before you dive into a whole set of features, not assuming that the teams can really understand, but try small iterations, let the team show you what it has frequently rather than go into something deep. All of that works when working with AI as well. So AI product management is still product management. And even AI development that's not for your products is still product management. Even when you're developing a system prompt, a prompt for, a ChatGPT project, still techniques from effective product management are valuable. Let me pause here for a second and see if we have any interesting comments. So Vlad comments that AI research, preferably spicy version deep research, appears to me to be the right point to start. Personally, in exploratory phase of this capability, clicked into action prompt and be a little gold nuggets about negative connotation if used properly. Flipped into action prompts. I'm curious, Vlad, how would you map this comment to the ideas that I've developed here in the talk? So when you talk about AI research or deep research, is it the sort of problem-oriented, outcome-oriented discovery that I'm talking about here? Is it more technical research? For me, I use deep research a lot. So I might start with chatting with AI. Later on, I'll talk a bit about ChatGPT projects, but one of the things that I've been trying and doing is considering my deep research prompts as products. So before I send ChatGPT or Perplexity or Gemini Plus on a deep research project, I think through what is the outcome that I want to have, what are the problems, what's the context that I can provide so that deep research is focused with, Gen AI about what I'm thinking of sending it to go do. One of the tricks in Lovable is don't just ask it to do something. First, have a chat with it about what you intend to do. Make sure you're on the same page. You can think about it like, having a conversation about the brief for work that you're asking any agency to do or any development team. And once you make sure you're aligned on that brief, now you spend the credits on doing it. So I've been doing something like that for deep research as well. And I'll talk later about how to use a similar process for system prompts. So let's go back to the testing notion. One of the things we often see is people that use MVPs to validate potential initiative. So in the context of AI, an MVP might be, let's create an agent. Let's provide people with Gen AI chats. And one of the things we've learned in the product world is that even an MVP might be too big of an investment. I began learn this decades ago when instead of building an MVP that would do speech recognition to work with CEOs, they instead prototyped it. They just used a stenographer to listen to the CEO and type out what they've heard and show that to the CEO and see what their reaction was. When the CEOs were asked, is this useful for you? They said, no, that's not a very desirable interface for us. So even a prototype might be too expensive. This relates to the law of market failure. Most new ideas fail in the market. Even if we can execute them, even if they're feasible, even if we deliver them, most new ideas fail in the market. They're not desirable. They're maybe not viable. And what we would like because of that is to try more ideas. How can we try more ideas? We need to assume that when we try more ideas, a lot of them will fail, and that's okay. But also, we will have more successes. The smaller the experiment, the cheaper it is, the more ideas we can try, the more we'll succeed. And this is the notion behind prototyping and the real approach of lean startup. It isn't go build an MVP. It's learn as quickly as possible, as cheaply as possible, whether the idea is desirable. That's the sort of stuff we talk about in product discovery and validation or lean product discovery workshops. And it applies in the AI world as well. It applies in two ways. When you're thinking about using a Gen AI based tool for an internal usage or as part of your product, think about what's the cheapest experiment you can run in order to validate whether that idea is desirable for the people whose behavior you want to change. Before you go and even do anything with AI directly, can Gen AI, or before you build a Gen AI solution, can you use Gen AI to run cheaper experimentation? So you can use Gen AI experimentation for whatever the solution is, whether that solution eventually includes AI or not. You can use Gen AI, for example, to make it easier for you to solve problems with a human agent. You can use Gen AI to accelerate the creation of content that might test out your assumption that people are interested in this. Think about Dropbox and how they've tested the interest in their idea using an explainer video, and how faster would it be for somebody to create such an explainer video these days using Gen AI video creation. You can, of course, create pre-order and landing pages using Vibe marketing much faster. And you can even create prototypes. Paper prototypes are, something probably of the past because vibe coding prototypes can be created very quickly and cheaply. Even if they won't necessarily work in production, they're great at validating flows for desirability. That can apply whether the actual solution uses Gen AI or not. So if we go back to the chasm here, whether you're thinking of building eventually an agentic workflow or AI agents, first, you might want to be the bot before you build the bot. You want to build conviction that what you have in mind is desirable. A productization step that I'm finding is really useful is before you build full agents, the notion of projects, gems, spaces, custom GPTs is really useful because they're not very expensive to build. They're very easy to iterate. You're not really giving the bot full control. You're still the human in the flow, but it forces you to think through what will you really ask the agent to do eventually? What is the context that is useful? What does an effective prompt look like? What do the inputs and outputs? What are the actions that it needs? What data access does it need? So evolving to the point that you have a custom GPT that does what you want well is a great starting point for, is it ready? Is it useful? Is it desirable to even turn this into a more autonomous workflow or agent? And that's something that I spend a lot of my time on. how do I develop and evolve projects, gems, I'm using them all over the space. And if people are interested, I'm happy to do a follow-up LinkedIn Live on this sort of uses I find for projects, gems, and spaces. One example is sales coaching. So I realized at some point that I might be a great agile coach. Some people say I am a good agile coach, a product coach, but I'm not great at sales. Some people say it comes with the territory, but you can be great at both. But I'm trying to become better. So one key question that I'm looking at is sales coaching based on the interactions that I have be useful. That's something that human sales coaches, of course, do for me. The question I'm exploring is how good can a project or a gem be for helping me do this? I can have the vision of an MVP where I connect all of this to my CRM. And just yesterday, I actually connected my ChatGPT to my CRM, but I haven't done real work with it. But a mini version of this would be, can I dump a certain interaction with a prospect and use a prompt? Can I develop a prompt that brings the insights from the business coaches, the sales coaches, whose style I really like? I know I've tried just dumping it in there and asking it to coach me on my sales abilities and my sales document. And a lot of what I found there was sales style that didn't really resonate for me. I really resonate with a sales approach that is more consultative, that's diving straight into let's work through the issues. Let's bring you some value during the call. Let's focus on the why. Let's, deliver accommodations that are custom for what you need. And I'm not into a hard sell. So my sales coaching prompt needs to provide sales coaching advice that is relevant for me, that is in tune for my style or the sort of style that I want to create. So I developed this prompt. I fed it with, these are the business coaches and sales coaches that I resonate with, aggregate their perspective and create a coaching prompt. And now I can feed a transcript of a call or an email conversation and, ask it, how did I do here and what would you do next? And it works nicely and it provides interesting insights. And there are people that I'm in touch with that are using these prompts as well for interesting insights. I was just chatting to somebody yesterday about it. So that's one example. The next level would be to actually integrate and create a ChatGPT, a custom GPT that has access to my CRM. The only thing that will do is it will do the overhead of extracting and feeding the AI every time. Maybe at some point I'll create an agent that continuously looks at what's going on in my CRM and reminding me, okay, it's time to try and follow up with John Doe. There are people that are in this stage of your CRM. It might make sense to try and do something. What we're trying to do here is to compress the truth curve. We want to develop our capabilities, if you want to call it products, whether it's real products or internal products for our use. We want to do that faster. We have less and less time to do these different things. We don't have big development teams work on our organization. Money is very expensive. We want to create as much impact as possible, as much customer outcomes as possible for people inside our organization, enable them to deliver as much value as possible for our customers with the minimal investment. And that means we need to be more efficient and we need to manage the risk of working on the wrong things. Gen AI can be used to accelerate experimentation, to reduce overhead in processes, and to assist us in building new processes and new tools. And in general, to turn the flywheel of working on our organization faster. One of the interesting dynamics are that all of this work that I do about what's the state of my customer factory? What is my strategy? Who are the personas that I work with? What are, deep research on options for sales coaching and business development? All of the output from that if I manage to curate all of that output, there can be a lot, but I need to curate it to the point that when my projects, when my prompts, whenever I use Gen AI, even a very simple prompt gets much better results than if I run it without that context. Even a simple prompt as, what should I do with this email? Because it has my context of what's the sort of sales coaching that I appreciate. What is my business? What am I selling? What are my current challenges? Who are the personas I work with? Where do they hang? What behaviors do we typically see from them? I need to make sure that that context, that additional information is available to my Gen AI prompts. And I do that by making sure that I provide all of that information in my projects, in my jams. And that creates much better results from me. It creates a situation where I don't need to enter a lot of manual context every time. AI does learn from feedback, and over time, the context becomes better and better. So I've shown you today both how I use, as well as business owners I work with, what are some ideas for how do we find AI gold? How do we get from a conversation about AI technology to real AI leverage? Investments that focus on your constraints, your most expensive problems, creating AI capabilities as products, developing them like products, discovering value like we do in the product space, leveraging Gen AI for the discovery itself, whether we're trying to build AI value or any other product or any other business or company improvement. And finally, the sawdust from all of this process and how it can be used to improve your Gen AI performance. And this in itself is sort of flywheel. The more you think about your organization and interact with AI about your organization and make sure that that information is available to future searches, it enables you to create better products and accelerate, and things become smoother and smoother. So I hope this was useful. Let me know what you think, what questions you have. Where would you like me to go next in the conversation around how to find AI gold? And with that, let me take a look at a couple of additional comments from Reginald. Good to see you here. Frederick and Blood. So be the bot before we build the bot. Yes. Rick shares my thinking on our ability to sell as product coaches. I think I'll have to do a bit more thinking about what Vlad means by flipped interaction. I think I know what you mean, but let me do a bit more research about that. Definitely market research. I find market research is where it's very tempting and a lot of time useful to use AI, and especially deep research. It can even be too tempting to rely on deep research. What I found myself doing recently is trying to make sure that the deep research is not too optimistic, doesn't convey depth and conviction that's shouldn't really be there. It's not necessarily hallucination because there's evidence that it relies upon, but I found deep research can state a fact, even if it's one blogger that said something somewhere. Having said that, if you look at the MIT research, it does look like some of that research to some people. A question from Reginald: when joining an organization as a product manager or scrum master, if they're asking to implement AI for improvements, would we advise we treat the AI agent as a product? Yes, that's what I would do. The question is, implement AI for what sort of improvement? Is it improvement of the agile process, or is it improvement of a business process? If it's improvement of the agile, the answer would be we treat it as a product regardless. One of the things that I've focused on recently is your agile ways of working are a product. With one of my clients, we're building the discipline of, when you're thinking about a new improvement for your process, start with an hypothesis. Start with something like the lean product canvas. Use the hypothesis prioritization. It's an hypothesis that we can improve our process here, whether that's the ways of working process or whether it's a business process. So I would definitely treat it as a product and try to use the truth curve to minimize my investment in that product. Before we go to an AI agent, I would first think about, how can I learn on whether this is desirable? Is it a real problem? What would be the leading indicator? and try to use the cheap to develop AI or something that's not even AI to validate that this is even worthwhile. I mean, it's tempting to say as a Scrum Master or project manager, I'm improving using AI, and I have clients coming to me that are saying, we want to do AI-enabled Agile. My question to them is, okay, what's the current problem with your Agile process? Why do you need AI? Let's say the answer is, we're spending too much time on estimation. We want AI to estimate for us. It's probably not a surprise to anybody that's following me that my answer would be, do you even need to estimate? Why not just, you know, use right sizing and avoid estimating instead of automating something that is not even a worthwhile process? And that's not anything new, by the way. Toyota have been talking about, stabilize the process, make sure that the process makes sense before you automate it for decades now. So that's my take there. There's a risk of becoming data blind, like in data led. There should still be a place for vision and heart. I totally agree. An AI coach could help you clarify this. Yes. I think it's tempting for organizations to say, let's entrust decision-making around where to improve and what to do to the AI overlords. Will give it the right data and, it will make the right decision. I fully agree with Frederick that that's pretty risky. I would start with, providing data, being data enabled, but people making the decision for most of the things. Once you localize, I think the room for agentic workflows and AI agents is for bounded problems with concrete context. And there's the whole notion of you run the prompt with that context hundreds of times. You simulate, you run acceptance testing for the prompt. And even though AI doesn't come with this answer every time, you run it 100 times. Think of it like Monte Carlo simulation in a sense. And you see what are the results. Does it come up with something reasonable 95% of the time? Is that good enough? Are the answers the extra 5% still reasonable, if not optimal, or are they something you don't feel comfortable with it making decisions? Do you want to give it control, or do you want it to just reduce the time investment, compress the labor that you need to still be involved with? Those are all important questions to work through. All we're saying here is consider the development of that approach like a product. Have an outcome in mind, work towards that outcome, leverage AI to achieve business value instead of just delivering AI value on its own. Thank you, everybody. If you have any additional questions, I'm happy to dive deeper into them.